Good evening, everyone. I think we'll get started with our study session. Vice Mayor Yentez just texted me that she's running 10 to 15 minutes behind, and Councilmember Hendricks is going to be virtual this evening, and he is running late also. So we'll get started with the February 8th, 2022 Gilbert Council study session. We have one item on our agenda this evening, the discussion of balancing housing with economist Elliot Pollack, and we welcome you to the podium and thank you for being here this evening. Is that on?
I'm very technologically, I have issues. So I appreciate being here. And so I have a presentation that we'll start with. Okay, so again, I'm here with a group called Home Arizona, and the only reason I'm an economist, I've been a practicing economist in Arizona for over 50 years. There are lots of people in Home Arizona, former politicians, former mayors, basically people in the industry, people who are trying to let the word out on what the supply-demand situation is in Greater Phoenix for housing, because it's different than it's been before. And while we are not a political organization, just as a general statement, we believe that zoning is best left at the local level, and do not believe a very recently introduced bill, 2674, I believe is the number, we just don't believe it's an appropriate solution to the problem. So let me now get into the statistics, maybe. There we go. Let's go back. So first of all, the first decade of this century, we overbuilt this in both single-family homes and apartments. The second decade of this century, we way underbuilt, and we're now at a situation where vacancy rates for both single-family housing and for apartments is as low as they've ever been. And it's not only the U.S., it's Arizona, is no different. And the way this happened, and these are Greater Phoenix numbers, the first decade of this century, we built 487,000 housing units. The second decade of the century, we built half that many, 240,000 housing units. On the other hand, while population growth slowed, we had 30% less people. That 20% disparity caused the problem. And going forward, the expectation is you're going to have about 880,000 new people this decade. So you have to build for a higher number, plus I'll talk about the hole we've dug for ourselves that we have to get out of. Phoenix employment is growing rapidly, not only as we re-employ people who were laid off during the pandemic, but all the economic development agencies in the valley have done an extremely good job. And there are a lot of, as you know, very large manufacturers and home offices, and the number of companies relocating here is essentially greater than I've ever seen. So employment growth is going to be high, and that's going to bring a lot of new employees. Population growth will be just under 2%, but that's about, again, close to 90,000 new people a year. It's a lot of people. And it's not only that there's a lot of people, but it's the age of those people. Demographically, the largest cohort ever were millennials. And millennials are now basically 27 to 32 years old. That's prime home buying age. So you got a lot of people. And the largest segment of those people are going to be in their prime home buying ages. This one is, I'll explain it real quickly. The horizontal red line that's upward sloped and horizontal is the age at which people purchase homes. This is home purchase loan applications. The blue lines are, again, the age group by year of the population. This is what it looked like in 2021. We ran it out 5 years, and this is what it'll look like by 2026. A tremendous number of people are going to be prime home buying years. And again, if you take a look at this, people in their 20s buy a lot more than people pre-20, obviously, but people in their 25 to 34 and 35 to 44 have the biggest increase in the percentage of people who own housing that you get in your life. On top of that, there's a lot of other pent-up demand. Obviously, a lot of millennials doubled up and will be getting married, and that will create demand for more households. But oddly enough, there are more people living with mommy and daddy who are 18 to 29, literally, than any other time since the end of the Great Depression in 1940. Sooner or later, their parents are going to kick them out of the house, and they're going to have to basically create their own housing unit. That is even more demand on top of everything else. How's the supply? Well, you're down to about a 23-day supply. If any of you have friends or kids who are out buying a house, you know what it's like. That's down from about a 70-day supply normally. And if you want something under $350,000, there's a 10-day supply. And so that is a real tough situation. In addition, as you also know, most home builders, when they build subdivisions, have homes that people can move into right away. Well, 18 months ago, there were 1,600 of those. You're now down to 500 of those. So there's essentially very little supply. Demographically, what happens is people will go out and they'll try to buy the thing they can most afford. But what's happening as we talk about affordability is they keep on going down, and they'll buy less expensive, smaller homes. At some point, they'll have to stay in rental units, and that keeps on going down. And then people at the bottom really have nowhere to go. And that's going to be a big issue. We'll talk about why in a second. This is apartments. You need basically, just to meet current demand, you need about 13,000 apartment units a year. If you want to basically dig your way out of the hole, there's a shortage. To get vacancy rates in apartments back to the historic norms, you need an additional 15,000 apartments on top of what you need for your annual population flows. So you need probably about 16,000 apartment units for the next 5 years to get things back to normal. Right now, there'll probably be about 14,000 delivered this year. There's more than that in the pipeline, but we don't have the labor to build them, and apartments are usually opened. If it's a 300-unit apartment building, it'll be open in three pieces over a longer period of time. So we're behind the 8 ball. We're not getting to the point we need to be at. Now, this current shortage is all types of housing, all price levels, and all income levels. There is not a group that is being spared difficulty right now. Obviously, it hurts worse at the bottom because you have fewer and fewer choices. Just so you know, even though the CPI was up a lot, 5.5% over the last year for core inflation, apartment rents in Phoenix were up 29.5%, and single-family resales were up 28.5%. And that doesn't happen unless you've got a real supply-demand issue. So let's see what happened to affordability. In 2015, 73% of the families in Phoenix could afford the median-priced home. And that's really good because median simply means 50% above, 50% below. If 73% can afford the median, that's very good. Today, it's 51%. Zonda ran it out for 2022, depending on what they thought the housing price increases would be. My guess it's going to be somewhere around 45% by the end of this year. And that's with interest rates at 3.5. If they go to 4, obviously affordability goes down more. We ran it out actually through 2025. And based on the assumptions we used, we think that by 2025, affordability is in the 20s. And that is something that Phoenix has never faced before because it's always been a very affordable market relative to our competition. And I thought you might find this interesting. Housing prices since 2000 have gone up roughly 188% in Phoenix. Interest rates, by the way, incomes have gone up, median income's gone up about 50%. Interest rates have gone down 64%. And that's what's allowed housing to remain affordable. I don't know that there's anybody in this room who really believes interest rates the rest of this decade are going to go down another 64%. Just unlikely. We also ran some numbers on what rents look like. If you had supply and demand imbalance, and this year rents went up 7 instead of 24, and Then next year they went up 4.5. Then with the rate of inflation about 3.2, and then 2. By the end of 25, you need about $72,680 to afford a median priced apartment. Again, 50% above, 50% below. If you keep on getting these rapid rate increases because of a supply-demand imbalance, you're going to need $90,000. It's going to be a real problem. We also took a look at a bunch of cities in the valley, and we'll talk about Gilbert in particular in a second, and to see where the people who you need to run a community live. The nurses, the cops, the firefighters, the teachers, the chefs, the guy who works at a Circle K, the waiters, the teachers, where are they going to live? Well, we took, again, a look at their salaries and could they afford the median priced either single-family home, two-bedroom apartment, one-bedroom apartment, or none of the above. And what we found is that the green is, again, they can buy a home, and that's, at this point, limited to nurses and police officers. Then firefighters, then the green is homes, the yellow is two-bedroom apartments, the orange is one-bedroom apartment, and the red is neither. I guess the most important thing here is take a look at what happened in 1 year between September 2020 and September 2021, which is where this data is based on, how much more red there is, how much more difficulty people are having affording a medium-priced home, so they're going down that ladder, if you will. So we took a look at Gilbert. It was one of the 11 cities we looked at. Gilbert, as you know, is the highest median income in the valley, and it's obviously a great beneficiary of the economic boom that Phoenix is in at the moment. And you can see that essentially your essential workers, along with people coming in, earning those salaries in other jobs, in private sector jobs, are just going to have difficulties. And this is a reality you're going to have to face over the next several years. Then I took it farther as an economist and said, what happens? Well, fewer people, there are going to be fewer potential buyers for the median priced home. So that's going to be a difficulty. Fewer people will own, more people will rent. There'll be more rental of single-family homes where there's doubling up of more than one family. More millennials and Gen Zs will try to live with their parents, but more likely as boomers get older, their parents are going to be living with their kids. Means smaller homes and more density, fewer workforce houses. Where do essential workers live? C and D apartments, essentially, the reality is they're going to get less maintenance. There's going to be more homelessness, and it's a very bad economic development picture because affordable housing is one of the things that's always made us a draw. And there's going to be upward pressure on wages and city budgets, and slower growth for the economy as a whole, which means less real income growth, and that's what bothers me the most. So, like I said, 7 things you could do. They're all the same. You need to build more housing units of all types across all ranges of income, and realize that we are at the bottom of the norm of affordability at the moment. We're about to fall off a cliff in terms of affordability. It becomes very difficult, especially as interest rates go up. So again, normally you'd need 20 to 25,000 for-sale units and about 15,000 rental units. You'd need another 2,000 to 25,000 new home inventory, and you need some replacements. But basically, we have to build, in total, to get out of this thing over the next 5 years, almost 42,000 housing units a year. That's total housing units. That's a lot of housing units, and it's made more difficult. There's labor problems, shortages. Unless you're an abnormally thoughtful city, your staff is really buried at the moment. Everybody's is, and there's got to be solutions around that. And it's not because the staff is bad, it's just because, they're flooded. It's just, it's just a bad situation. And so I'm bringing this to you just to basically let you know that it's not going to get better fast, and it's something you have to consider, I think. So again, the key takeaways: affordability has fallen, but it's about to plummet. There's virtually no vacancy or available units. Supply has not kept pace with demand, and our success as a community in attracting jobs and people has not been matched by a sufficient increase in the housing supply for those new employees, and a continued shortage of housing is going to drive up costs and threaten economic development efforts. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions if there are any. I'm sorry to give you this news, but it is what it is, I'm afraid. Well, there are four things. I can't tell you, we have research on it, but I have not committed to memory on what's what. You have lack of labor. There's just not enough people who are in the construction biz to build everything that's being demanded, not only for apartments and single-family homes, but even for industrial buildings or any other type of construction. Two, supply chain issues. There are builders I know who've got rows and rows of houses, except they have no windows. Supply chain issues that's not an issue that's going to self-correct quickly, because if I'm here in the middle of nowhere and I have a plant and my product is critical for this thing in Mexico and this thing in China and this thing in the US, until those three plants are basically out of commission till this gets done, then this gets done, and maybe that gets them back in commission, maybe it doesn't. It's very complex and takes a long time. So I think that at the end, especially commodity prices are going to come down back to normal levels. But what I'm saying is I'm not sure when that happens, because of third world countries that are not properly vaccinated, and labor issues. In the U.S., as you know, for the first time in American history, there's like 3 million more jobs open than there are total number unemployed. That's unheard of. And so it's going to be a while till you have the labor to cure that problem. Then there's the issue at the individual cities. Your staffs are buried. You have to live within your budget, so it's difficult to get the money to hire more people. And even if you had the money, who knows if they're out there, because you're competing against the private sector, and they probably can afford more in this type of environment. There's also more and more regulation as you try to make things safer, or but that is still a cost. And so those are really, to me, the major four issues. And some of them you can deal with, some of them you can't. I know that there's, when anybody hears affordable housing, and I know there's a lot of money for that, they think Cabrini Green. And I basically would challenge that. How many people in this building right now have never lived in an apartment? Is there anybody? just part of life. You know, it's part of the life cycle. It's not only kids getting out of college and starting their life, it's married couples just starting out. It's older couples who want to use it as a lifestyle. Now it's going to be a lot of boomers who sell their homes in their expensive homes because their kids have moved out, and they'll basically live their life in a way they want to because they have the money to do so now because they're living in an apartment, and they freed up that money. You can't look, you have to understand who lives in apartments, and they're just regular people. Yeah, you hear about bikers and so on and so forth. That is such a small percentage of the total, and I'm not even sure it applies to Gilbert at all, you know, given how new Gilbert is and how well taken care of it is. So but you're going to have to do something because people are being pushed down that ladder, and at some point, it's going to become a real issue. I live in Scottsdale, and my wife and I like to walk around downtown Scottsdale, and there's not a night we don't walk around half a dozen to a dozen homeless people in downtown Scottsdale. So and if you take a look at the news, you see the places with really big homeless issues. They've all got housing affordability issues. So that's just one of the cohorts that has to be dealt with that people don't like to deal with, but it's going to become a reality.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And one of the reasons I brought that up, and you alluded to it when you started, was the legislative efforts to come over local government regulations and require requirements that are a major determining factor when it comes to affordability. But I do think it's important for cities and towns to review and analyze our roles and ensure our actions are achieving their intended results, and even work together regionally to share best practices and make sure those efforts are consistent and streamlined as possible. However, it seems the local requirements have remained relatively consistent over time compared to the other factors that you're discussing now, and that are really contributing to the housing prices that we're seeing right now. So I think that legislative effort is very disingenuous to portray this as one of the leading factors in housing affordability. And I know the Gilbert team makes every effort, as shorthanded as they are, and I know they have a couple of positions open right now, and like you said, trying to fill those positions, to work with our developers and have encouraged higher density in commercial areas, and we allow for accessory dwelling units and other factors. And a few years ago, we created a new zoning category, multifamily high, or MFH, to allow for additional height and density for multifamily projects. And we have seen multifamily developments coming to our community with about 5,000 multifamily units planned that are not yet developed. But when we look at HB 2674, along those lines, it's a bill that was introduced at the state legislature, and I hope the council has heard about it last week, that was pulled off a committee this afternoon for discussion, but it's something they're being presented as something to help with affordable housing. And I think myself and many others would argue that it does nothing at all to keep housing prices affordable. There's many provisions in the bill that I won't get into all of them, but I think our residents need to be aware of what this could mean for them. Our neighborhoods, our community, and our entire state will change with this bill. If this proposed legislation were to pass, multifamily developments would be allowed by right in any single-family residential district, commercial districts, and existing agricultural districts. By right means multifamily projects would be approved administratively with no public review process. As long as they submit a completed application, they are approved. Our residents would have zero notice and no opportunity to learn about the project or provide any comments. This bill would nullify our general plan. No rezoning or general plan amendment would be required. Multifamily developers could ignore zoning districts, zoning codes, design standards, and adopted building codes. When I say these units would not have to follow design standards, that includes height restrictions. We could have multifamily buildings up to 75 feet in some areas, and we could only be able to require 5-foot setbacks. This bill would also remove planning commissions from the process and strip local councils of their zoning authority. So again, I just don't see how this bill does anything at all to impact affordability, and instead results in our residents having absolutely no participation in what happens to their neighborhood, and our town staff would be stripped of their ability to develop well-planned communities. Sorry, I got off track, but House Bill 2674 is related to the conversation today, and with that, I wanted to make sure that I'll close my comments and just, but I assume you're going to be following that legislation closely,
Yes,
as you said earlier, and wanted to ask you if you believe it would actually have a significant positive impact on housing affordability.
just as a general statement, zoning must stay local. Every community has a right to self-determination, and taking that away is just, you know, as after 50 years of staring at economics, I don't like the concept of central planning anywhere, and that's basically what you're having. In that circumstance, it's not going to work. And I think there are better solutions. I think that when people understand the issue and voters understand that if you don't deal with this housing issue, their community really is going to be far worse off than it otherwise would have been, that's the support you're going to need. Do what you need to do at the local level.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Mr. Pollack? Councilmember September?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Do the forecasts that you have, that you've forecasted beyond today, include the idea of the enormous amount of land that's state land that's just east of us in Pinal County, and that's going to be developed with homes soon? Does it consider that, and so there's another part of the question, are there other opportunities for developers to build now that people can work from home? And many companies are going back to work on a hybrid schedule where maybe you're in the office 1 or 2 days a week and some not at all. Are there opportunities for developers to build in places that normally they wouldn't have in the past because they were considered too remote?
Phoenix tends to pulse out like a balloon. You get some developments that are really out there on the outskirts, but usually Greater Phoenix grows like a balloon. It kind of pulses out. And I think that'll continue, and state land usually gets absorbed, when you're at the edge of the bubble. There are some exceptions to that. I believe that what is going to happen is that the home is going to become more and more important, and the design of the home will change because you're going to need 1 to 2 offices. You're going to need a playroom for the kids, because childcare is going to be a major issue well into the future, in terms of the number of people who are willing to do it and what those people cost, because so few people are willing to do it. It's one of the reasons that a lot of the female labor force has not come back yet. They're dealing with their kids or they're dealing with their parents. I think my projections were in the aggregate. What happens to the whole valley if this happens? Gilbert, as you know, as I told you, I've been out here since before the freeway, and it's when I spent a lot of time out here. And I think that smart city councils, good government, will make a big difference as to what happens to one community versus another. But virtually nobody's going to get a free pass on not having to deal with this. I don't know what else I can say. I just didn't. I haven't looked at individual pieces of land, just the aggregate numbers.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Councilmember Tilke?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Pollack, thank you very much for the data that you provided. And I know a lot of work went into it, so I don't want this to sound not grateful for that, but that was the easy part, quite frankly.
Yep.
The hard part is the next step, right?
Yes.
And so a couple of things that I'm hoping that the organization that you're working with is looking at what are some of those solutions as we move forward, not just we've provided the data and that's it. I think you're right on when you said that each community is going to have to look at it differently. We're all made up a little different. Councilmember September brought up the remote workers and flexibility, and then also to add to that, you see businesses that have large footprints of office space looking at downsizing, subleasing, doing some different things like that. And in some cases, and I don't see it really happening in Gilbert as much, but maybe even downtown Phoenix, some of these high-rises that aren't used for that use, perhaps that's an effective way of changing from an office building into some type of affordable housing building. So I'm hoping that people are looking at those things. Also, if in some of your demographics, it was talking about the millennials, which are getting older, and we've heard for years and years and years, they don't want to own a home. And according to your data, they're getting to the age where they are going to own a home. If we, the Valley, puts all of this time and effort into, let's say, I'm just going to go to apartments at this point, filling the needs of apartments, yet we see this spike and now they're all going to be owning homes. Are we going to have an overabundance of apartments after 5 years?
I don't think so. I think what's happening with affordability is usually it's in Arizona, it's 64% owned, 36% rent. As affordability becomes more of an issue, there are going to be more renters than owners. This hybrid product, build to rent, is going to be a sort of a step for people. You have 2 kids and a dog, you're not living in an apartment. Mm-hmm. Or one of the major demographics for those are women who were divorced and have kids. They want a little yard, they got a dog, whatever it is. But what I'm saying is that I think that ratio is going to change as affordability becomes more of an issue. Will affordability get back to where it was? I doubt it. Will it get back at some point over the next 5 years? Yeah. Once the supply chain is resolved and once you get more labor, and I think that's going to take a change in some immigration laws, quite frankly, that will cure a lot of the problem. If a city would allow a developer to hire, for example, an engineer who you approve, and then you spot check the engineer, essentially you're adding to your staff on the developer's payroll. These are things that you have to look at and decide if they're for you. But all I'm saying is you have to sort of open your mind to things you might have just said, nah, we're never going to do that, mm-hmm. and see if it works for you. One other thing, there is no question that you have to make sure that you're building for demand. So you don't want to end up building so many that you have a glut, and that's always the risk. Mm-hmm. My problem is that the longer supply and demand are not in balance in terms of shortage, the higher prices become, and the more severe the swing becomes at the other end.
Thank you. My last question is, how do we control fast versus quality?
Well, I think you have a good planning staff, good engineering staff at the city, and you have your standards. And I'm not telling you to whitewash your standards. You can't do that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because that's not what we're going to do. So thank you.
Yes. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you for the information. I've been the beneficiary of many of your studies over the years that you were talking about. And usually the solution was just build our way out of it, back in the heyday. And that's going to be much more of a challenge. My question really isn't for you as much as for our town manager. I wanted to ask, we have our City of the Future initiative that we are working on. Is it addressing some of the issues that Elliot's brought up tonight?
Mayor, Councilman Anderson, it's a great question, and in full transparency, it's come upon us so quick, I don't know that we've fully grappled with it yet. Elliot's information he shared with us tonight is a great overview of where things currently stand, where we came from, and potentially where we're heading, but we'll have to continue to dig into this and start to make some determinations on how best to address it.
That's Thank you. I think there are many indicators that we can develop just based on some of the data that he's given us tonight that we can measure over time. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Mr. Pollack while we have him here? Vice Mayor?
I have more of a philosophic question. How would you maybe frame this issue to residents in your community who don't believe that it's an issue that affects them? How would you explain it in a way that makes them want to care? And I say it like that because the other side of the coin is people have, a motivation to protect the values of their home, and so they see kind of the ability to close growth on, after they've been able to afford a home as a good thing. So
I saw this cartoon. In fact, it's in some of the speeches I give. There's a sign that says 200 new homes. And this couple is talking to the salesman, and it said that we want to be the first person to own a home so we can complain about the other 199. And that, it's a difficult situation because those people who are anti-growth make a lot of noise. The question is, are there people on the other end who don't make noise or will now start to make noise to help you understand that most people don't want their city to have reduced levels of real income? They want jobs. They want places for their kids to live. And you're not going to get any of that unless you do some things that maybe in a perfect world you wouldn't do, but the world isn't perfect. The reality is not everybody is up here in income, and even these people are going to be living down here because it's so expensive for a house that they used to afford. And if you wait for the trouble to occur, if you wait for the homelessness, if you wait for companies not locating here because housing was too expensive, by that time it's too late, to be honest with you. Take a look at California, I won't even go into that.
Any other comments or questions? No? Thank you, Mr. Pollack. We really appreciate your time and effort on this, and I know that you're going around speaking to many of the cities and towns, and we really appreciate that. I think it's a story that needs to be told.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you all of you.
Thank you. We have nothing else on our study session agenda, so I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting, and you all have some free time.